invited my sister, 25F, and her boyfriend, 26M, over for dinner. I love cooking and have spent hours preparing this fancy meal. Homemade pasta, a slow-cooked ragu, a salad, and a tiramisu for dessert. I was really proud of it and excited to have them over. When they arrived, everything was fine at first. We sat down and I started serving the food. Her boyfriend, let's call him Steve, stared at the pasta for a moment, then looked at me and said, "I don't eat carbs." At first I thought he was joking, but nope, he was dead serious. He goes on about how he's super into keto and carbs are the enemy. Okay, fine, that's his choice. But when I offered to make him a salad or something else on the spot, he refused and said that I should have known about his diet beforehand. This is where it gets weird. He then pulls out a small Tupperware container from his bag, filled with what looked like boiled chicken and broccoli, and starts to eat it at my dinner table while the rest of us are trying to enjoy the meal I spent hours making. I was stunned and, honestly, kind of insulted. I told him it was rude to bring his own food without mentioning it to me beforehand, and he should have at least given me a heads up. He then goes off about how people need to respect his dietary choices, and that I was being controlling by not accommodating his needs. At this point, I'd had enough. I told him, if you can't eat what's served and won't even let me make something else, then maybe you should just get out. He stood up, said something like, "I'm just trying to be healthy," grabbed his Tupperware and walked out. My sister stayed for a bit but eventually left too, saying I overreacted. Now my sister's mad at me, saying I embarrassed her boyfriend and made them both feel unwelcome. My mom thinks I should apologize, but my friends are on my side, saying Steve was being incredibly rude. AITA for telling him to get out? OOP's comment top comment. Commenter, your sister didn't give you a heads up about his diet. OOP, honestly, no, she didn't. I'm not sure if she even knew how serious he was about the whole keto thing because she never mentioned it. She eats pretty much anything, so I assumed he was the same. But even if she had, I feel like it still would have been polite for him to at least say something beforehand instead of just showing up with his own meal. I would have happily made something keto-friendly if I'd known. There is no consensus bot on AITA, but top comments were NTA update post, September 21st, 2024, 6 days later. Well y'all, buckle up because things have escalated in a way I never expected. After my initial post, I figured things would calm down once my sister had time to cool off. Spoiler alert, they did not. So the day after I told Steve to leave, my sister texted me saying they want to talk things through at a family dinner. I assumed it would be just the three of us, maybe at a neutral restaurant, where we could hash it out like adults. Nope. Instead, my sister invites my parents, my brother, and Steve's parents to this dinner at my parents' house, turning it into some kind of weird intervention. I show up thinking it'll just be a casual conversation, but the moment I walk in, Steve's mom, let's call her Carol, is already going off about how Steve has always had special dietary needs, and how people who care about him should respect his boundaries. The woman acts like the guy has a life-threatening allergy, not a trendy diet. My mom is sitting there looking super uncomfortable, while my dad's just quietly sipping his beer, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. So Carol starts listing off Steve's dietary restrictions, and she's acting like I personally offended the whole keto community by serving pasta. Then, brace yourselves, Carol pulls out a folder. Yes, a literal folder, with printouts. She hands one to me, one to my mom, and one to my dad. I'm flipping through this thing and it's full of Steve's dietary guidelines, suggested meal plans, and even a list of keto-friendly restaurants we could go to in the future. At this point, I'm doing everything I can not to laugh, but it gets worse. Steve pipes up and says he's willing to forgive me for disrespecting his lifestyle if I agree to host a redo dinner where I follow his dietary restrictions to the letter. He says this will prove I'm serious about making amends and respecting his needs going forward. I thought he was joking, but no, he was dead serious. He even pulled out his phone to show me some keto recipe apps that I might find helpful. I was in total shock. My sister, by the way, said absolutely nothing during all of this, just staring at her plate like she wanted to disappear. My mom, bless her, tries to smooth things over by suggesting we all just eat whatever we want when we're together, but Carol snaps, "It's not that simple." She says that in their family, they all follow keto together, and that's why Steve is so passionate about it. At this point, I've had enough. I stood up and said, "Look, I'm not redoing the dinner. I'm not making anyone a special keto feast. If Steve can't eat what I cook, that's fine, but bringing his own meal to my dinner without even telling me was disrespectful, and I'm not apologizing for feeling that way." And then, this is where it gets absolutely bonkers. Steve's dad stands up, points at me and says, "This is exactly why Steve doesn't trust women to understand him. They always make it about themselves. The whole room went silent. My dad finally spoke up, saying, "I think it's time for you all to leave," and started walking toward the door, basically escorting Steve's parents out. Steve and my sister stayed behind, but Steve was furious. He started yelling about how families should support each other, and then accused me of trying to sabotage their relationship because I'm jealous of what they have. At that point, I just walked out and left the whole mess behind. Here's the kicker, though. A couple of days later, my sister called me and told me she and Steve were taking a break because she needed time to think. Apparently, this whole keto fiasco was the last straw on a long list of controlling behavior from Steve. She didn't realize just how bad it was until the whole family saw it play out at dinner. She even told me that Steve had been trying to get her to follow his diet for months, but she was hiding snacks in her car just to get a break from all the keto madness. So now, Steve's gone full radio silent, my sister is staying with me for the time being, and I'm still getting passive-aggressive texts from Carol about how hurt Steve is, and how he's just misunderstood. Honestly, I'm just glad my sister is finally seeing how controlling this guy was. TLDR, Steve's keto obsession led to a full-blown family intervention where his mom handed out dietary guidelines, and now my sister is taking a break from him because she realized how controlling he is. Am I the asshole for refusing lunch with my girlfriend's mom to honor my late brother's memorial tradition? Original post, September 20th, 2024. Throwaway account. INM, 30, lost my younger brother when I was 22. He had cancer and fought very hard. Ever since, I've been donating blood on the anniversary of his death every year. I take the day off from work, visit his grave, donate blood, and then come home, relax, and watch his favorite movie. I know it's a simple, personal tradition, but it means a lot to me. My girlfriend of 9 months, Anna, F., 31, asked if I could meet her and her mom. I have met her many times before, and it wasn't the meeting of the parents for the first time, for lunch yesterday. I told her no and explained again about what I do on my brother's death anniversary. She got upset and said, "Well, it's my tradition to have lunch with my mom every time she's in town, and she really wanted to see you. You can do your stupid blood donation tradition any day." I explained to her that it's not just about the blood donation. Later in the evening, while I was resting and watching my brother's favorite movie, she texted me again, asking me to join them. I reiterated that I really didn't want to and would hang out with her mom next time. She replied that I had embarrassed her in front of her mom with my selfishness and laziness. Since then, she's been distant. Do I owe her an apology? AITA. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. Question. Did Anna know about this tradition before her mother came to visit? I'm thinking the answer is yes because you said explained again, but I wanted to verify this. OOP. Yes. I have mentioned it many times before. I think she forgot about the date, so I re-explained that I can't join them that day for that reason. Commenter. NTA, she doesn't respect your tradition, which is 1 day a year. Her mom will probably come to town more than 1 time in the year. Your girlfriend is selfish and entitled. OOP. Yes, she is retired and lives 3 hours away. She comes here often. Commenter. Your tradition outweighs getting dinner with a visiting relative/in-law. I'm sorry for your loss. I hope you had a good day of remembering him. If I could, what's his face in the movie? OOP. There are 2 actually. LOL. The very first Despicable Me movie in Star Wars, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Commenter. Have you watched the new one? I see all the movies my dad would have loved to see from the franchises he loved. OOP. Not yet. I'm planning to watch it with my dad. My mom died when we were kids and my dad raised us alone. On my brother's birthday, Plan B is having him over for a movie night on my brother's birthday if the movie will no longer be in movie theaters in December. Commenter. I think you would need to think very carefully about this GF. Losing someone you live with is very hard and she is very careless with your feelings. Sorry for your loss. I lost my brother when he was 12 and I was 15. Still miss him. OP, my condolences. I miss him a lot. There are certain video games I can't even look at or play anymore because it was our special thing. Commenter. Downvoted. I see plenty of room for doing lunch with your GF and her mom, and still commemorating your brother's death on the same day. It would have been easy to fit lunch between visiting a grave, drawing blood, and seeing a movie. You also missed a chance to invite your GF to partake in your ritual, and instead seem to have just used it as an excuse to not go out with them. You're going to lose a lot more people in life before it's through. I understand death is hard, but it's been nearly a decade. Sometimes clinging to those ancient memories only holds us back. OP. She had never met him. He passed long before my current relationship. She never showed any interest to join and I wasn't expecting her to join. I mean, if she wanted to, she would be more than welcome to join. I didn't exclude her. My brother's is not some ancient memory. We were very close and we only had each other growing up as my dad was working a lot. His memory isn't holding me back in any ways. OP comments 1 hour after posting. I texted Anna that we need to talk after reading the comments. I'm going to end it. I don't have her mom's number, unfortunately. OOP 3 hours later when asked for an update. Sure. So far no reply. OOP responds to a downvoted commenter. I'm not apologizing. I sent her a text to meet so I can end it. Expecting to have 1 day out of a year is not too much to ask for. Update. Same post. September 22nd, 2024, 2 days later. I texted her that we needed to talk. She never replied. Just blocked me from everywhere. Social media, WhatsApp. Her best friend who was following me on Instagram blocked me too. I'm not sad. I wanted to end it anyways. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate your kind comments. Some users suggested that my brother/remembrance tradition saved me from getting serious with her in a lifetime of misery, and it made me smile. Thank you again. After abandoning us for his online girlfriend and vanishing for 8 years, my husband suddenly reappears with an offer to rejoin our lives. I, 40F, would want everyone's perspective since I'm unsure about a recent choice I made for my family and am feeling mixed about. My world went upside down 8 years ago when Robert, my husband, abruptly said he was leaving the children and me. Online he had met a woman and developed feelings for her. His choice came out of nowhere and rocked me. For weeks Robert had been acting distant and unusual, but I had written off his behavior as stress due to his job. After more than 10 years of marriage, we stayed by each other through thick and narrow. I had never given infidelity any thought. Robert said at last one evening that he had met someone. Those words tore at my heart. He shouted out that the woman, Isabella, was the hottest woman he had ever seen. Her name is having spent the past 3 months in conversation with her. He developed a relationship that led him to see he was dissatisfied in our marriage. Every word he said sliced right through me like a knife. In my stomach I felt a whirl of wrath mixed with hopelessness. Though he couldn't hide his affections for Isabella, he kept reassuring me he still loved us. He claimed he had to visit her personally to find out whether it would go anywhere. A whirl of feelings swamped me and I couldn't make sense of what was happening. Our house seemed as though its walls were squeezing in on me. As I questioned him whether he was leaving us and the kids for this woman, my voice faltered. He nodded hesitantly, stating he had to do this for himself even if he wasn't sure I would grasp. Having given it a lot of thought, he was scheduled to meet her and begin a fresh life. He advised me he was prepared to help us financially as much as he could, but he had to follow his heart and satisfy the love of his life. All around me the world collapsed. It still astounded me that my husband was leaving our children and me for someone he had never personally known. Screaming, pleading, doing anything to get him to remain came first. But from his countenance, I realized he had already decided what to do. There was no reverse. Robert left us to tell our kids their father wouldn't be returning, moving out the next week. At 9 years old, Emily asked 1,000 questions, but I knew no responses. Just 4 years old at the time, Nathan clung to me as though he felt something was badly wrong and struggled to really understand the gravity of the situation. During this period I felt numb and broken. My children were the only thing keeping me from drowning in my grief. When I first told my family about Robert, they responded exactly like me. They simply couldn't comprehend why on earth my husband of so many years would do something like this. Although my parents encouraged me to pursue this legally, at the time in my life I lacked much to inspire me. I still thought my spouse would return to us. When Robert's parents learned their son had left us, they looked completely devastated and powerless. He repeated the same narrative even though they begged him to come back over several calls. Days finally stretched into weeks, then weeks into months. I was left to gather the fragments for the kids as well as for my benefit. Around us, our family and friends came together to provide encouragement and a sympathetic ear. Though the hurt of my husband's betrayal persisted, I concentrated on securing a job so Emily and Nathan would have a steady home. Robert's parents were quite helpful during this period. They provided financial support and watched the children whenever I needed a break. 8 years have gone by and Robert's only remembrance in our life now is a far-off one. Apart from that, he never contacted the children or me. He used to send us money on occasion. Over the years, I have essentially turned into a single mother, working non-stop to raise her kids and give them the love and care they so richly deserve. Emily stopped attempting to get in touch with her father and learned not to bring him up even though she thought about him sometimes. Nathan never even mentioned him since his memory was so much hazier. Though it hurts to lose their father, they have both grown up to be amazing people. Robert's father died suddenly not so long ago. We all went to his funeral. His family attorney later told us he wanted to speak with me about his will. Robert's father had left some money for his grandkids, the lawyer said. Though it wasn't much, it may assist pay for my children's college tuition. Sitting with my kids, I told them the news they wouldn't have to worry about college costs going forward. Their smiles radiated delight, and seeing their contentment was quite lovely. Knowing that after such a protracted period of uncertainty we have one less worry on our plate felt like a weight has been taken off. I got a call last week from a number I don't know. Unbelievably, Robert was on the other side of the line. After 8 years, I was speechless to hear his voice and felt a flood of contradictory feelings. He paused, then said he wanted to see me right away. I begged him to clear me since I was perplexed. He kept requesting to meet me and said he wanted to talk to me about an offer. Why he was phoning now after so many years of silence eluded me. His continuous calls were hard to ignore, hence I paused to collect my ideas and at last decided to meet with him, though warily. The meetup was scheduled, and we agreed to meet close to my workplace in a cafe. A rush of questions and uncertainty swept over me as I hung off the conversation, making me nervous about seeing him after so many years. I chose not to tell my children anything until after I saw what this offer entailed. The days preceding our planned conference were an emotional roller coaster. In my thoughts, I couldn't help but go back over the years of trying to come to terms with Robert's abandonment, the agony of his abrupt death, and the challenges of raising our children alone. I arrived early on the day of our meeting and anxiously drank my coffee while waiting for Robert. Not long after, he came in, determined but also hesitant as he approached me. He seemed older, worn, and oddly unlike the man I had married. Our first conversation consisted of awkward pauses and cautious phrases. We sidestepped the elephant in the room, concentrating instead on friendly welcomes and catching up on the years gone by. We seemed to be two strangers negotiating the traces of a former life. Robert eventually plucked the confidence and started to explain why he had suddenly returned into our life. He mentioned how Isabella did not match the woman he had imagined her to be. She was, it turns out, a single mother too, but she had never told him the truth until he had left us and was standing on her doorstep. Their relationship was fraught with difficulties mostly related to her gambling addiction, which caused her to blow all his money. Although they argued often, Robert had decided to support her since he was reluctant to abandon someone else once more. But he came to see how fleeting life was to remain in a miserable circumstance every day until his father died recently. He talked about how much he missed everyone back home and how let down he felt about the decisions he had taken 8 years ago. Robert went on stating he had considered returning to us several times over the years but lacked the will to face us. Then he said that his father had left him their large lake house, which we used for vacations before Robert left us. He informed me he wished to sell the house, therefore enabling him to be set for the rest of his life. Quietly nodding, I listened to him. Then Robert delivered a bombshell. He said he wants to return to us and provide our kids with opulent living. If I embraced him back into our life, he reassured me I would never have to work once more. He reassured me we could enjoy the rest of our lives free from financial concerns, but I looked at him with incredulity. Using the bequest to create a better life together, Robert basically wanted us to heal and offer our family a second shot. I gave Robert's comments much thought, knowing the possible advantages the inheritance could offer for our family. But it was impossible to forget all the years he had missed, leaving me to look after our kids. Though the concept of financial stability appealed to me, I couldn't overlook the suffering and resentment accumulated over years of his absence. I thus told him quite honestly that although I valued the offer, I couldn't forget the last 8 years. I said I had been juggling job and raising the children alone. Although we may not have everything, we led stable lives and I cannot risk subjecting my kids and me to suffering once more. I wanted to keep them safe and wasn't sure if I could ever rely on him not to vanish once more. Desperate, Robert kept begging me to change her mind. But I knew that if I let him back into our life, I would be greatly risking the stability of our family. Though the idea of turning down his offer hurt, especially given the financial comfort it may provide, I couldn't ignore the emotional scars he had left behind. Since my encounter with Robert, my parents have been urging me to change my mind about turning down his offer. They keep reminding me that following everything he has put us through, the least he could do now is provide our children and me a better life free from financial concerns. According to my parents, people may grow and maybe Robert has seen his faults and wants to really repair our family. They believe I am selfish and want me to put the comfort of my children above my pain. I had been battling my decision late into many sleepless nights. I haven't been able to get myself to share with my kids Robert's comeback. Their reaction to the news and their handling of the concept of their father returning into their life following 8 years of absence worry me. Between the terrible recollections of our past and the possible advantages of taking Robert's offer, I have second-guessed my own judgment. So Reddit, am I the bad guy for turning down Robert's offer and maybe holding my kids and ourselves away from a better life? Update 1. In a few days, people left hundreds of comments and messages for me. That most of you don't believe I'm in the wrong makes me happy. After considering everyone's recommendations, I realized it was time to talk candidly with Robert's kids. Having him resurfaced in their life and shocking them was the last thing I wanted. After supper, I sat Emily and Nathan down today to gently introduce the topic. I started by sharing with them the surprising return of their father and his offer to re-enter our life. Their expressions showed a mixture of uncertainty and interest as they worked to grasp what I was saying. Their responses differed depending on whether I told them he had inherited the lake house and wanted to sell it to aid us financially. Now 17 years old, Emily displayed a range of feelings, from shock to fury. She couldn't understand why Robert wanted to come back after so many years and was as perplexed as I was. She remembered the suffering she had experienced in his absence, even if she also missed her father occasionally. Originally, she said she had missed having a father figure in her life, but she finally learned to live without him and no longer wanted him back. Now 12 years old, Nathan told us he didn't remember Robert at all, hence he didn't really care about my turning down the offer. He battled to understand the whole ramifications of the circumstances. Since I valued their opinions and feelings, I informed them straightforwardly whatever they decided would happen. Nathan consented, claiming he was happy with things as they were. Emily said she had absolutely no want to meet him, though the idea of maybe healing our family appealed to me. I knew the scars from the past ran deep and my children's welfare came first in my mind. Walking away from Robert that day in the cafe was the right decision I made. After that, I meant to discuss the next line of action with my parents. Though he departed before we could proceed with a divorce, I never intended on being married to Robert, against what most people believe. Although I lacked the means to challenge him at the time, I have come to see that there is no reason in keeping married to this man anymore. Update 2. Over the past 2 weeks, Robert's unrelenting calls had grown even more desperate. He kept phoning even after I told him I wanted him gone. Being a non-confrontational person, his persistent attempts to approach me made me feel cornered and emotionally exhausted. I worried he would show up at my place of employment or pay the children visits at the school out of the blue. I was so determined it was time to get in touch with his mother. She looked to be the sole one who could assist me to grasp his motives and handle his unrelenting search since she knew of his reappearance. I visited with her to let her know I wanted to formally call it quits with him and to let her know I was annoyed with his continuous calls. His mother explained the true reason behind his tenacity during this talk. She said that when Robert's father left him the lake house, he had included a well-crafted clause. Only if he came back to our family could he become the house owner. I had to sign the paperwork also to support his claim to the house. This realization stunned and disgusted me. I at last realized why Robert had been following me for several weeks. His main motivation for getting in touch was to get ownership of the house, not a sincere want to atone or reconcile. The whole scenario seemed like a merciless emotional manipulation, thus I had to give much thought to my next action. It was time to act after I found Robert's actual goals. Especially one based on deception and secrets. I wanted to break out from a relationship. I have begun searching right now for a lawyer to assist with rapid divorce preparation. I have also discussed with my parents, who regret advising me to give his proposition some thought. They are encouraging of my choice to proceed with the divorce since they now realize he hasn't changed over the years. They are sorry for ever advising me to pay attention to him. I have blocked Robert so he cannot trouble me going forward. When I serve him with divorce paperwork, I want to see him personally. Update 3. My previous update 2 months ago, and now I can at last offer a cheerful one. I reached out to Robert under the guise of meeting since, as I had indicated, I was going to deliver the divorce papers. He signed right away. Emily and Nathan wanted to see their father one final time. They had many questions, and I felt it was important for them to get some closure despite the hurt of the past. We set up a meeting in a neutral location, a nearby park where we had many joyful family memories before Robert left. While Nathan clutched to my side uneasily, Emily's eyes were full with questions and doubt as she stared at her father. I began by telling him I knew his actual reason for getting in touch after so long. Robert objected that he really wanted us to give him another chance, not only the phrase in his father's will that drove him. Knowing I could not believe another word this man spoke, I shook my head in disgust. We were done. I informed him, and the least he could do to provide our kids some closure was respond to their questions. He nodded quietly. Emily first asked him whether it was worth it to be leaving us for another woman. Robert said he was disoriented and had made a terrible mistake, ashamed looking down. With a more direct approach, Nathan asked him if discovering his happiness came before abandoning his wife and children. Robert inhaled deeply, then said he wasn't thinking well at the time and acknowledged he was mistaken in leaving us. Strong and perceptive, my children were not happy with only those responses. Saying he was in a midlife crisis, Robert tried to defend his affair. Robert revealed sensitive aspects of his life with Isabella, the challenges they encountered, and his awareness that he had been running after a mirage as the talk went on. Though I doubted Emily and Nathan thought he was credible, they listened carefully. They wanted to know why he had never stayed in touch and whether he truly regretfully left us. There was agony in the voices of my children. Robert said he had been paralyzed by his own guilt and had no idea how to deal with the fallout from his behavior. He underlined again that he could give us a luxurious life right now and that he wanted us to be whole once more. Looking into the eyes of my children, I realized the choice was obvious. They shared my lack of belief. They would not let Robert waltz back into our life paying money as a temporary repair for the harm he had done. It was a matter of ethics, of defending the courage and resiliency my children and I had displayed over his absence during the preceding 8 years. Resolved, I informed him we had moved past him and we no longer needed his money or him. As he examined the divorce paperwork, I could see a mixture of regret and disappointment. Saying he really wanted to make up for those lost years, he begged me, but I was firm in my decision. Then he told me we could both gain from it if he promised to divide the lake house selling earnings with me. Emily said we didn't need his charity money, and Nathan nodded in agreement, adding we had what we needed to be happy. I suppose Robert started to cry at this moment as he at last understood what a major error he had made. He continued apologizing to the children, realizing he had made a horrible mistake by abandoning us and knew we could never pardon him. That day I felt free at last as I strolled away from the park hand in hand with Emily and Nathan. I had never realized how big of a load I had silently carried for the benefit of my kids. Watching my kids stand up for me and have my back felt great. Our divorce will follow my determination. Though I know it may be some time until I am formally free of him, I intend to take some time off to spend with my kids in between. We have been eagerly awaiting this trip for a long time. Going to Disneyland. To help offset the terrible memories of the past, I want to build lovely memories full of laughter and happiness with my children. I know that we can boldly and resiliently confront whatever the future presents as long as we have each other. My children and I are on a road toward healing and building a new, solid, and honest life despite the difficulties and emotional upheaval we have gone through. Though this chapter is far from finished, we will be creating our own story from now on, and I am resolved to make sure it is one full of love, trust, and development. Update 4. I have some fantastic news to share since my previous post. It feels like a major success since I was promoted at my job. It took me some time to get here, but at last I am making a decent living that will let me give much more for my family. Along with financial stability, the encouragement makes one happy to know that their effort has paid off. The divorce process is running smoothly overall at last. After knowing the background between my husband and me, I have engaged a great attorney who is sure the divorce will go without a hitch. Though it could not be easy, our closure and a fresh start depend on it. Over this period, my family and friends have been at my side offering encouragement. Having more than enough now, I intend to send my kids to therapy. Knowing that my kids can struggle with abandonment, I want them to better manage their feelings and go over any residual worries. After looking at therapists who specialize in handling such problems, I came across a sympathetic and seasoned one who focuses on guiding children and families through challenging emotions. As a parent, meanwhile, I think about encouraging my children to explore hobbies outside of their course of study. Emily, my daughter, spends hours painting exquisite works of art for our house. She has a great gift for it. Nathan, my son, has always been naturally gifted at soccer. We spend our weekends supporting him at his games. Seeing my kids living vibrant lives makes me proud. About Robert, we haven't gotten in touch, and I think it's better to keep it that way. As many of you rightly guessed, one day Isabella, his affair partner, approached me out of the blue. The message was hatred and animosity toward me for purportedly stealing Robert away from her, not an apology as one would expect from the other woman. She blamed me for their relationship failing and charged me with being the reason he left. Isabella attacked me in her letters, calling me names and leveling cruel charges. She asked me why I had brought Robert back to our family and said I had coached him. The messages were hostile and disturbing, and the degree of her wrath overwhelmed me. This woman had the guts to be upset with me when she was the reason my family split 8 years ago, and it astounded me. I answered her saying I was in the process of divorcing Robert and that I had no want to remain with him. She had no right to get in touch with me, so I reminded her of the suffering and uncertainty our family had experienced when Robert left for her. I underlined how my children had endured, and how our lives had been inverted all those years ago. I made it plain that I never wanted him back and that she should blame her gambling addiction and herself if she needed to assign blame. After delivering the message, I blocked her, hopefully preventing her from trying to get in touch once more. I want her to not ruin the quiet life my kids and I have created. Regarding Robert's mother, I do chat to her occasionally since she has always been polite to me. She wants me to do whatever it takes to be happy and admits her remorse on the way things have gone. Fascinatingly, his mother also stated that the lake house would not be coming to him as his father had intended, since my decision not to reunite with Robert would prevent that. Though it felt right, this discovery surprised me. Robert should pay the consequences, as his self-serving choices had not only destroyed our family but also hurt another. It is time to step forward and bid the past behind us. Although the road is difficult, the mending process is under active progress. With every day, our future seems more promising as my children are flourishing. My sister tried to seduce my fiancé before our wedding, got caught on camera, and was disowned by our parents. My manipulative, narcissistic sister attempted to seduce my fiancé just before our wedding in an effort to break us apart. Fortunately, her actions were caught on camera, leading to her being disowned by our parents. This story revolves around my older sister, Dove, 29F, who has never been able to tolerate my existence, as she apparently believes I'm living a life that I don't deserve. Dove, who is now divorced and jobless, is living with our parents. She had dropped out of college to be with her wealthy boyfriend, who eventually divorced her when her true nature became apparent. Growing up, my relationship with Dove was far from ideal. She was always the pretty and smart one, full of herself, and our parents consistently showered her with praise, which left me feeling inadequate. Everyone around us constantly admired her looks, while I was often ignored, and it hurt deeply. Dove used her popularity to mess with my mind, telling me that no one liked me, which made me incredibly insecure. My parents never supported me or acknowledged my feelings because Dove always lived up to their expectations. This led me to distance myself from them throughout my childhood and teenage years. Dove frequently had friends over when our parents were at work, and they would often mess with my room. On one occasion, they even ruined a school project of mine, nearly causing me to fail. When I threatened to tell Mom about it, Dove blackmailed me, saying she would share embarrassing pictures of me with my classmates. At just 14 years old, I was terrified. Dove never took responsibility for her actions, and it was pointless to tell my parents because they never paid attention to me. My mom never had my back, although my dad would occasionally call Dove out. For instance, one time she used my phone to send strange pictures to my friends after I'd complained to Dad about her. Another time, she spilled coffee on my prom dress and then played the victim, crying and claiming it was an accident. After that, I stopped confiding in him altogether. I never really understood why she harbored so much hatred towards me until later, when I realized that she was a narcissist, and her behavior had nothing to do with me. She was a walking red flag in her relationships, cheating on every guy she dated. As much as I hate to admit it, she was also a gold digger. Something her ex, who remains a friend of mine, can fully attest to. Essentially, she was pretty awful as a teenager, and nothing changed as she grew older. If anything, her behavior only got worse. It was entirely my parents' fault because they never bothered to discipline her. After school, things finally started to look up for me. I worked incredibly hard to get into my dream college, and after a few years of struggle, I landed my dream job. It was there that I met the love of my life, Atlas, at an office conference. He was smart, kind, and handsome, and we hit it off instantly. Within a few months, we started dating. We traveled a lot, which only strengthened our bond. Atlas was very close to his family, so he introduced me to his siblings and parents just a few months into our relationship. But when it came to introducing him to my own parents, I took my sweet time. The main reason for this delay was my sister Dove and her malicious intentions. I always had this nagging feeling that she would find a way to ruin everything. She was the one who always got the best of everything as a child and teenager, and now that my life was going better than hers, I was certain she wouldn't be able to handle it, especially when it came to my relationship. However, I couldn't keep delaying the introduction any longer. Atlas was beginning to grow suspicious of my reluctance to introduce him to my family. So, after a year and a half of dating, I finally told Dad about him. Dad was thrilled that I had found a man who was worthy of me and invited us over for dinner. While I was excited, I was also equally stressed because I knew Dove could go to any lengths to sabotage my happiness. Although Atlas was aware of my family dynamics, I went over it with him in detail. He was relaxed about it and reassured me that he would handle whatever came his way. A few days after I spoke with Dad, I unexpectedly received a call from Dove. It was surprising since she had never reached out to me before. She started asking questions about Atlas and when I planned to visit home, but it was clear that her real interest was in getting more details about Atlas. I could only assume that Mom had told her I was seeing someone and that our relationship was getting serious. Dove was suddenly trying to get all chummy with me, but I could see right through her motives. Now, I'm grappling with whether I should take the risk of introducing Atlas to Dove, knowing full well that her intentions are far from good. I'm also considering an alternative, perhaps inviting my parents over to my place so they can meet Atlas without involving Dove. Update 1. Thanks for all the great advice. Some of you asked for more details about Dove, so here you go. It's true that my parents, especially my dad, began to see Dove differently after her divorce, and she really brought it on herself. She had been academically gifted, but once she got to college, her entire focus shifted to her looks and beauty. That's when she met Jeremy, a super rich guy, and jumped into a relationship with him, completely abandoning her studies. During my final year of school, I was busy preparing for my college entrance exams, and Dove kept telling me I would never get into my dream college. But I did, and for the first time, I got validation from my parents. They were genuinely happy and proud of me, but Dove couldn't stand it. She was jealous that all the attention was on me and not on her. To sabotage my moment, she announced her engagement to Jeremy at the celebration party my parents had organized for me with close family and friends. It was obvious from Jeremy's expression that he had no idea she was going to do this, but she succeeded in making the day all about herself. Everyone immediately became curious about Jeremy because, according to Dove, he was extremely wealthy. Dove loved to show off the expensive gifts he bought her and would constantly tell me that I'd never find a rich husband because I was ugly and no one would want to date someone like me, always trying to make me feel bad. I eventually told her that I wasn't a gold digger like her and that I could pay my own bills, so she could have the rich husband if that's what she wanted. In truth, she was incredibly selfish and downright evil, the most selfish person I've ever known. A week later, Dove and Jeremy got engaged, but by then I was already off to college and didn't attend the engagement. During my time in college, I had no communication with her. It actually felt good to come home for the holidays, knowing that Dove was living with Jeremy. Even during the holidays, she would often be away on vacations to exotic locations with him. After a year of dating, they had a lavish wedding, with most of the expenses covered by Jeremy. Dad chipped in for the remaining costs as a courtesy since Dove wasn't earning anything. Their marriage didn't last long, though. After 3 years, they got divorced. The reason, as I later found out, was that Dove didn't want to have children, while Jeremy was eager to become a father. Although he assured me he never pressured her, he was frustrated that she never disclosed her feelings about it beforehand and had avoided the conversation for 3 years. He also mentioned her drinking and partying habits, flirting with guys at bars, and that she had married him purely for his money, with no emotional connection. I couldn't help but wonder how he remained blind to her true motives for so long. Jeremy even showed me videos of Dove out drinking with guys who were touching her inappropriately, and she did nothing to stop them. I was relieved he finally ended things with her, but my parents took Dove's side, blaming Jeremy for pressuring her about having kids, never acknowledging her faults. After the divorce, Dove moved back in with my parents since she wasn't working. She had dropped out of college to marry Jeremy, and now, after 5 years, she had no degree and no work experience. She pretended to be traumatized by the divorce, but in reality, she was happy to be free. Within a month of the divorce, she was back to her old habits, clubbing and hooking up. Her life seemed to revolve around weekly dates and ditching people, and her Instagram stories made it clear what she was really up to. 2 years into my career, I landed my dream job with a great salary, and my parents were thrilled. After receiving the job offer, I visited home, and Dad was so proud of me, I couldn't have been happier. We were having dinner when Dove returned home, looking partially drunk. Dad was upset at the sight of her and commented that Dove should have focused on her education like I did, instead of ruining her life over Jeremy. He pointed out how much I was earning and how Dove was still dependent on them for money. Mom tried to get Dad to stop making such comments, but hearing this, Dove lost her temper and slammed the door. That's when Dad finally realized just how spoiled Dove had become. He told Mom that it was time to knock some sense into her, insisting that Dove needed to start taking her life seriously and get back on her feet instead of continuing to leech off them. By this point, I was completely fed up with her. Later, Dove barged into my room and smugly told me that no matter how much money I made, I could never be like her. She even went as far as to body shame me, pointing out my belly fat and chubby cheeks. As a teenager, those kinds of comments used to break my heart, but now, I just didn't care. I laughed in her face and told her that I had no desire to be like her and that she clearly needed to work on fixing her attitude. That set her off, and she demanded that I leave the house. I calmly reminded her that this was our parents' house, and she had no authority to boss me around. The next day, as I was packing to leave, I noticed that 2 of my dresses had been badly torn, clearly cut with scissors. I went downstairs and showed my parents what Dove had done. Dad was furious and called Dove out, but Mom, as usual, tried to make excuses for her, claiming Dove was in shock and didn't know what she was doing. Dad wasn't having any of it. He warned Mom to stay out of it and then unleashed his anger on Dove, telling her that she needed to get her life together because he was done providing for her or tolerating her narcissism. This confrontation didn't sit well with Dove, and she ended up hating me even more because of it. From that point on, I was subjected to Dove's wrath, but her hatred didn't bother me. It only became unbearable when she started making advances on my boyfriend. After much consideration and talking it over with Atlas, I decided it was time to visit my parents with him. There was no point in hiding him from Dove any longer because, no matter how hard I tried, she would eventually find a way to get to him. My friends advised me that it was better to test his loyalty now than to risk losing him later. Dove would only succeed in her malicious intentions if Atlas allowed it. With a sense of dread, I showed up at my parents' house with Atlas. I tell you, she was practically throwing herself at him. As he was exchanging greetings with Mom and Dad, Dove almost forcefully pushed herself onto him for a hug. I have no idea what made her think Atlas would fall for her looks. She had completely transformed her appearance, dyeing her blonde hair black, getting all dressed up in a new outfit, with her nails and hair perfectly done, as if she was on a date with him. She tried to force her way into the conversation, but it was clear that everyone was ignoring her. At the dinner table, she quickly rushed to sit beside Atlas. When I asked her to move so I could sit there, she gave me an annoyed look but eventually complied. She kept asking Atlas about his interests, and if he mentioned liking something, she would immediately claim she liked it too, even if it was obvious she didn't. Then she'd go on about how she and Atlas were so compatible, winking at me as if to suggest I shouldn't take it seriously, though it was clear she was trying to cover up her intentions. Atlas was visibly uncomfortable, and he ignored her, continuing his conversation with Dad and Mom. Her desperate attempt was so blatantly obvious. After dinner, I decided to take a shower, leaving Atlas by himself. That's when Dove walked in, asking him to call her number because she claimed she couldn't find her phone. It was obvious that this was just a ploy to get his number. How twisted. Atlas also told me that while I was occupied with other things, Dove tried to play the victim, telling him her sob story about the divorce and how much mental distress it had caused her, dragging on about how it took her years to recover. To make matters worse, Mom even chimed in, blaming Jeremy and speaking ill of him. After a while, Atlas asked me if I wanted to go for a walk and give him a tour of the neighborhood. Before I could respond, my sister quickly stood up and said, "Sure." Atlas looked at her, surprised, and firmly stated that he wanted some alone time with me. Her face turned red with embarrassment, and she quietly retreated to her room. It's only been a few days since that visit, and I can already sense that Dove is planning more schemes to lure Atlas into her trap. I can't deny that it worries me, but at the same time, I trust my man and am curious to see how he handles her advances. Update 2. Hello everyone, I'm thrilled to share that I'm engaged. Atlas proposed to me last month during a trip, and yes, he got down on one knee with a ring, and I couldn't stop gushing over it. But even after our visit to my parents, Dove didn't stop with her manipulative tactics. She started texting Atlas, asking how he was doing. Knowing that Atlas is a huge cat lover, Dove began flooding his inbox with cute cat videos, even though she never cared for cats before. After discovering that Atlas adored cats, she went so far as to get one herself and began recording videos of it to send to him. For the first few weeks, Atlas showed me Dove's desperate attempts to appear caring and concerned, sending messages that pretended to inquire about his work and well-being. After a while, though, he stopped sharing her messages with me. I assumed she had finally given up on him and moved on, and we both shifted our focus back to more important things, especially with our busy work schedules. One day, as I was scrolling through social media, I noticed that Dove had added Atlas to her account. She was liking and commenting on nearly all of his posts, using silly heart icons. She even went back and commented on old pictures and videos from 7 to 10 years ago. I immediately felt uneasy about it, so out of the blue I checked his phone. I discovered that Dove was still texting him occasionally, but her messages were unread and seemed odd. She was clearly trying hard to get Atlas's attention. In his call logs, I saw missed calls from her, including one that came in around 3 a.m., which made me feel anxious. I confronted Atlas about why he hadn't told me that Dove was still texting him. He got a bit nervous and explained that he had been ignoring her and thought it was better if we didn't talk about her. I pressed him further about the calls, and he remained calm. Then he sat me down and explained that one day, Dove had called him, sounding really upset. He got scared, thinking something might be seriously wrong, but it turned out she just started talking about traumatic experiences related to Jeremy, saying she needed someone to talk to. Atlas told Dove that she should talk to her parents instead and that it wasn't appropriate to call so late. He also mentioned that she should have let me know first. That really struck a nerve with me, and I told him that keeping this from me wasn't okay and could lead to me losing trust in him. He reassured me that he would never fall for her tricks and that I had nothing to worry about. Even with his reassurance, I had read too many stories about husbands falling into similar traps, and I didn't want to be naive by blindly trusting him. I told him that the next time Dove called, he should hand the phone over to me so I could catch her in the act. Sure enough, one night, her call came through, and Atlas woke me up in the middle of the night. I answered the phone, and Dove immediately went silent when she heard my voice. She quickly claimed it was a mistake and hung up. The next day, I tried calling her multiple times to confront her, but she never picked up. So I texted her from Atlas's phone, letting her know it was me and that she needed to stop calling or texting him at odd hours. I also told her that if there was anything urgent she should contact me directly instead. After that, she finally stopped texting him, and I felt relieved that she was out of our lives. After Atlas proposed to me, I sent a picture of the ring to my dad. Dove must have shown it to Mom, and not long after, she started her stalking behavior again. She began texting Atlas and sending ridiculous videos. I was completely fed up. As soon as Atlas told me, I called her and unleashed all my pent-up anger, telling her to stop playing games and get a life. She mostly stayed silent while I let it all out, but I didn't realize at the time that she wasn't going to back down easily. As soon as I hung up, Mom called, furious, yelling at me for insulting my sister. Dove had told her that I was accusing her of trying to steal my fiancé. Mom claimed that my cruelty had caused Dove to have panic attacks and insisted that I be more considerate toward her, reminding me that Dove had been struggling with depression for years and was still recovering from her traumatic divorce. I found it laughable because Dove was never depressed about her divorce. I hung up the call and immediately informed Dad that if they continued to ignore Dove's behavior, I would have no choice but to cut them out of my life. I was done being a puppet in her game. I couldn't keep turning a blind eye to her antics. Update 3. I never imagined Dove would stoop so low. She had always made my life miserable, but I never thought she would actually try to seduce my fiancé before our wedding. The bullying, body shaming, and constant ridicule were one thing, but realizing that she was willing to go as far as trying to ruin my wedding by seducing Atlas was a bitter pill to swallow. As we were planning our wedding, I wasn't in contact with Mom after our last confrontation. However, she eventually called and apologized for shouting at me, admitting that she had lost control out of fear for Dove, who was supposedly having panic attacks. One of my cousins later told me that Dove had been crying to everyone about how I was accusing her of trying to steal my fiancé and that I didn't deserve any of the good things in my life, especially Atlas. According to Dove, because she was the gorgeous one, she believed she should be the one getting the best of everything, not me. When I told Mom about this, she went quiet. She simply told me to forget everything and focus on my wedding and the happy life ahead. Fortunately, everything went as planned, and Dove managed to keep a low profile for a while. At the very least, she didn't interfere in our lives during that time. On the day of our wedding, we were at the venue, busy with final preparations, when I received a call from Atlas's best friend, asking me to come to Atlas's room with my parents. I jokingly teased him, saying that Atlas wasn't supposed to see the bride before the ceremony, but he insisted that this was something serious that needed to be dealt with before the wedding. My heart raced as I hurried to Atlas's room with my parents. When we arrived, Atlas was lying shirtless, drifting in and out of consciousness, while his groomsmen recounted Dove's devious actions. Apparently, while Atlas was getting ready, Dove had shown up with a drink. He initially refused it, but Dove persisted until he took a sip. Almost immediately, Atlas realized the drink was spiked. He excused himself and went to the washroom, where he called his friend, explained what had happened, and asked him to come over. By the time his friend arrived, Atlas had partially passed out and was out of the washroom. Since his friend was sharing the room with Atlas, he had access and quickly turned on his camera as he entered. He overheard Atlas shouting at Dove to leave him alone while she was on top of him, undressing herself, and rubbing against him. This disgusting act was captured on camera. When Dove noticed Atlas's friend, she pretended they were making out, covered herself up and left the room, smirking at his friend and asking him not to tell anyone. Little did she know that she had already been caught on video. When we walked in, Atlas was still lying there, partially unconscious. The drink was so potent that even a few sips had left him severely dizzy with a pounding headache. The glass was still there, with solid particles settled at the bottom. It was an incredibly humiliating moment for my parents, who were in disbelief that Dove could do something so horrendous. My mom immediately called Dove and told her to come to Atlas's room. When she arrived, her lipstick was smudged, and she nonchalantly said, "I know you guys are mad at me, but it was mutual. Atlas loves me and has been making advances on me ever since we met. Today, he convinced me to have a one-time hookup before the wedding." My mom slapped her hard, telling her that we were aware of her lies and that everything had been recorded on camera. Dove was stunned by this revelation, and my parents wasted no time in kicking her out of the venue before she could cause any more trouble. Security was instructed not to allow her back inside. It was obvious that she had been trying to make it known that she had been with Atlas, hoping I would call off the wedding. My dad immediately called a doctor, who confirmed that Atlas had indeed been served a spiked drink, which had severely affected him. Atlas's parents and siblings were so upset that they wanted to confront Dove, but my parents had to apologize profusely to them to help calm the situation. The wedding had to be delayed until Atlas recovered, which took several rounds of vomiting to get through. Word of the incident spread quickly among the guests, who were buzzing with gossip for the next few days. Once Atlas had fully recovered, my dad walked me down the aisle. While I was happy to finally see Atlas as my husband, I couldn't shake the stress of everything that had transpired. During our vows, Atlas added an extra promise, vowing to protect our relationship from anyone who didn't want to see us together. After we returned from our honeymoon, my parents came to visit us and apologized to Atlas for all the trouble Dove had caused. My dad reassured us that Dove would be out of our lives for good. He had actually kicked her out of the house and told her to fend for herself. Despite this, I'm still struggling to move past the incident. My wedding was perilously close to being called off, and if Atlas's friend hadn't recorded what happened, I might never have believed that Atlas was innocent in all of this. My brother once threatened to kill me, my husband, and our children. He was sentenced to a year in prison but will be released soon. What should I do? Hi everyone, I'm so grateful to this community and the incredible support. I'm posting this to update you about our case. My brother called and threatened to kill me and my husband and kids about 2 months ago. He also has a history of getting guns, an axe, and other supplies with plans to commit other murders. He has hurt a dog sexually when he was younger, but did not hurt people yet. It has been horrible and difficult, and I'm not sure that I could have survived emotionally without my friends, colleagues, and this community. You gave me amazing advice. We are moving this upcoming weekend. My husband has been more supportive with the move, even though he still feels that he could take on my brother. I'm not interested in physically confronting my brother. I don't want to live in constant fear. Meds in the psych hospital didn't help him. I think the only thing that will help is a long-term inpatient unit, but our state doesn't have those resources. My brother was released from the hospital straight to jail. He currently awaits his court date in May. I met with the prosecutor today and gave my statement. They put his bail at $500,000, the highest the detective I've been working with has seen for a misdemeanor. His lawyer requested to lower it, but the judge refused to lower the bail amount. I was told the judge is aware of his previous serious plans and preparations to kill. The prosecutor plans to go for the most jail time possible for this, a year. I don't know if jail is right for him, but if he is released, he will hurt someone. I spoke with my dad, and he was so mad at me for speaking with the police. He kept saying how my brother was asking for help and sharing his fantasies with me, not threatening me. He kept telling me to withdraw my statement. He said that I'm the one that put my brother in jail. It broke my heart. I told my dad that I only told the police the truth. I told him my brother is sick and will hurt someone. My dad said, "You don't have a crystal ball." True. But he's made his intentions clear again and again and again. His doctor said he has no empathy. His only thrill is thinking about hurting others. The prosecutor said that even if I withdraw my complaint, the state is still bringing these charges. The social worker and prosecutor said this to my parents, but my dad, mom, and sister keep insisting that I need to recant my statement. I'm terrified of every small noise in the house. We are leaving our friends and everyone we know and moving because of my brother's actions. I feel so heartbroken that my dad and family are blind to it. Everyone else, police and medical staff included, can see the clear writing on the wall. Relevant comments. Commenter, please keep your location private from your family. While they downplay the threat your brother poses, they're a risk. I can easily see them disclosing your new location to him just to prove he's not a danger. OP posted about her relationship struggles with her husband. Please help me stay in my marriage. I'm losing my patience. Married for 8 years. We have 3 kids, 7 to 2 years old. We both work full-time. Recently we had to move due to a safety issue. My husband did not want to leave and made me feel crazy for wanting to flee for our safety. Our already fragile marriage feels unstable with the added stress of moving. My husband is on the spectrum, and I thought that working from home would help him be less stressed and more kind. But he is unhappy, unkind, yelling at me and the kids, and generally questioning any decision or request I make. I made a compromise when I married him, knowing that I did not like his sense of humor or sex with him, but thinking that his intelligence and our common values would get us through. Now I feel stuck because I don't feel like our values are the same anymore. He wants material possessions. He hates meeting new people. He can't tolerate the noise and chaos our kids bring. I don't mind the chaos and noise, that's just kids. I love minimalism. To me, a stranger is just a friend I haven't met yet. I'm making new friends every day out here, and he's refusing to meet anyone new in our new city. I love being at work because I feel valued and appreciated. I love being with my kids or my friends for the same reason. But I dread every interaction with my husband. When he's gone for several days, I feel so happy because no one is criticizing me or yelling at the kids. He's on depression and ADHD meds and in counseling, but I don't think it has helped. Having known him for this long, I know he isn't changing. I keep trying to convince myself to stay. I want to stay for our kids. I don't want to ruin their lives. I'm just so very unhappy with constantly managing his feelings. I don't care if I will be alone my whole life. I don't care if I'll ever be loved. I just don't want to feel miserable. But I need to stay for our children. I feel so lost. I just want to not feel bad. Relevant comments. Commenter: why do you need to stay for the children? What good is it for them to be exposed to this? OP: I've dated people before that had these qualities but didn't match on values, or ended up doing something that hurt me. I made a decision to marry my husband knowing we matched well on most things. But since having kids, he has become angry. Activities that we used to enjoy together he no longer enjoys. He used to make me feel special. I'm hoping that things change and he becomes happy and fun again. Update 1. We have 3 young kids and we both work full-time. We moved to a high cost of living location, and my husband has encouraged me to get a second job because I have a profession that pays well. I told him that I enjoy working, and I do, but I manage appointments for the kids and already feel stretched thin. I use lunch breaks to pick up meds for the kids or make phone calls for appointments for the family. My days off are used to take kids to appointments. I clean the house in the evenings. I let him know he'd have to take over the appointment coordinator role, start cooking more, and do more childcare if I'm working 50 or more hours a week. Well, I got off of work at 7 tonight and ran by the pharmacy to pick up our son's prescription. I was there over my lunch hour, but they messed it up, so I came back after work. The line was long and I texted him updates. By 8 something I got the med and drove home. He was pissed because he took the kids to Costco for dinner and one accidentally dropped their food. I got home in time to help with bedtime while my husband yelled at the kids and told me he can't handle it. He said he could handle things if I actually made it home at a reasonable time. I'm kind of dumbstruck. Does he want me to work more or take care of the kids? I can't do both, and I told him this ahead of time. When we met, he told me that he wanted kids, and I agreed to have kids. I love our children. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but he told me that would stress him too much. I'm now feeling forced to work but still having to pick up the slack at home. Relevant comments. Commenter: sounds like your job is already tough getting off that late in the evening. Does he work, and do you have daytime childcare? If he can't handle a single evening with the kids, I'd be concerned about him having to do that most nights. What a whiner. He's going to have to toughen up and get some better parenting skills and patience, because parenting doesn't necessarily get easier, just different, as the kids get older. OP: we do daycare. I'm a healthcare provider and my job gives me a lot of satisfaction, but we recently had to move for safety reasons. I'm the one that forced us to move because I was fearful for the kids' lives. The job I took promised full-time but ended up only having 30 hours a week, so I'm now picking up extra days at another clinic and interviewed to work at an urgent care on the side. Our son has severe ADHD and anxiety. I had to get all the doctor appointments scheduled, find school and daycare for the kids, get us into a protective program, take the kids to appointments, etc. My husband doesn't cook and he yells at the kids. He is in counseling, but it sounds like the major thing the counselor said to him was that he has to take time for himself. I thought that was wild. I have done my best to keep us afloat. My husband kept his old job, but it doesn't pay as well and he has to drive back to the old house to fix it up to sell. The drive is 8 hours each way, so I'm caring for the kids on my own weekly. I'm struggling. We don't have family here, so not much support. Writing this out makes me feel like maybe I'm a dummy for doing this and not putting my foot down, but I signed up for counseling and it was a disaster. The therapist told me to stop having expectations and to not complain, and then proceeded to argue with my husband. Commenter: Dude, there are a lot of bad therapists out there, so please don't let that deter you. We had to go through a few before getting one that worked for us. I couldn't believe the internalized misogyny and blatant sexism of many. The worst one didn't take insurance, so we were paying $200/WK for one session. She was obsessed with his family and how they were the image of perfection. She asked if she could meet his parents. She also told me that I should not have expectations. It should be clearly communicate and discuss expectations. She told me I was not allowed to bring up relationship issues. She would only ask me to listen to him and validate his feelings. It goes on and on. Do not let someone speak to you like this. Your feelings are valid, and find a new therapist if you are told otherwise. OP, wow, did we see the same therapist? It was almost verbatim what this therapist said to us. I'm the one that booked the appointment and filled out, not even joking, the 39 mandatory forms before the appointment. She berated me for filling out all the forms myself. Before any input or questions, she pointed to my unhappiness in our marriage from the filled out forms, and told me that I clearly overthink things and talk too much. Yeah, you had 39 mandatory forms. Of course it's a lot. Update 2, quick recap on her previous situation and thanks the community for their support. I want to let you know we are safe. We are in our new state. My husband is trying his best and being far more supportive. He still believes we should have stayed to fight, but he's accepted the fact I felt the threat was real. The kids are adjusting to life in our new state. We made some friends. Our location is not public, despite my license to practice medicine being available online. It is far from the first result and our address is hidden. My employer is very respectful and kept my name off of the clinic list of providers. I've signed up for address protection through our state. This is thanks to many of you who advised me to move and hide our address. I appreciate all your kind advice. I am flying back to our old state today to testify against my brother tomorrow. He decided to go for a jury trial on advice from my parents. I'm an anxious mess and have tons of conflicting feelings. I helped raise my brother and a large part of my identity has been helping and protecting my siblings. A small part of me feels that testifying against him and sharing everything I know will destroy his life and be a betrayal. But I know he made his bed and must have consequences. It's the right thing to do, as shitty as it feels. The boy I helped raise is not there anymore. He is not the same person that sexually abused a dog, that has threatened to shoot up a hospital pediatric unit, stab my sisters, kill my parents with an axe, or kill me and my husband and kids with a sledgehammer. I dread seeing this man tomorrow. Every time his photo shows up on my phone I panic. Meeting people with the same name makes my heart beat faster. I can't stop feeling fear. I plan to tell the truth and let the jury decide if my brother is guilty. I worry that this will destroy what's left of my relationship with my family of origin. I have to do the right thing even if my parents and sisters think this is a betrayal of our family. My sister told me this will not change things between us, because she believes I will do the right thing for the family. But the truth is I plan on doing what's right for my family and the community. Again, I am grateful to you and will update you on how things go. Updated added via an edit. I just gave my testimony. My brother and mom were staring daggers into me, but I did my best to keep calm. They only allowed me to testify about the threatening phone call, not about any of my brother's past history. Not about guns, axes, or dogs. Relevant comments. Commenter, you're doing the right thing. Congratulations to you for actually doing something and preventing a tragedy. You're awesome. I don't know about American law, but is there a possibility to testify without the defendant in the room? Like, remove him from the room while you can testify. I've asked for this and I've seen it happen many times as a lawyer in another country. OP, I do not think there is a way to testify without my brother being in the room. I know that my family will also be there, and in a way, knowing how much they do not want me to testify is the worst part. My family is Soviet with a history of alcoholism, abusive behaviors, and secrecy. I'm trying to break that cycle for my own kids and to raise them to tell the truth, even if it is difficult or scary. It's heartbreaking that my brother grew up to be this person and threw all of us into this horrible situation. I wish that I didn't have to go against my parents' wishes, but I truly don't have a choice. Commenter, your brother is desperate for help. And your parents and sister want to ignore those cries for help because IDK they don't want to look bad. If your brother is released and hurts or kills someone, what then? OP, my parents were mad at me for taking him to a crisis center initially when he admitted to being suicidal. They thought I should have brought him home to them to take care of it themselves. I think their approach would have allowed him to hurt someone. They think him buying guns and an axe, and tactical gear, and scoping where to shoot people is just fantasies he had. My dad said it's no different than watching World War II movies, or reading historical fiction. My parents also don't believe that he sexually abused their dog, even though he admitted to it multiple times and the police and FBI told us about it and the social workers confirmed it. I didn't want to believe it either, but my brother admitted to it himself to my face and he looked very sheepish and embarrassed that he did it. He didn't expect that his doctor would reveal it to the police, but they did. My parents care more about their son and how the family looks than the actual well-being of their daughters or grandkids. Update 3. Hi everyone. Thank you again for your kind support. Here is a hopefully final update. I testified against my brother today, in the case of threatening to kill me, my husband, and our kids. My brother was found guilty. I gave a victim statement and my husband gave one virtually. I was able to provide more background on his past threats and guns and other weapons. My testimony at trial was very limited to the phone call, so it felt good to be able to say all the reasons we have to take him seriously. My mom gave a tearful character statement saying he was so gentle and would never hurt anyone. The judge cut her off mid-testimony. It was honestly so validating. He will be released from jail in 2 weeks to serve out his sentence of 2 years of probation with regular check-ins, mandated therapy, and possibly having to wear a GPS tracker. The judge also extended the protective order for me and my husband and kids to 4 years. My mom is renting a hotel room for my brother once he's out of jail. They are trying to find a halfway house, but it will most likely be not very secure. At least probation and mandated therapy should help, I hope. I do not plan on having any future contact with my brother. I will see if we have contact with my parents. I plan on still talking with my sisters. I've urged them to not share their addresses with our brother, but they are adults. I'm not going to reveal our location to any of them because I don't trust that they won't reveal it. I feel that the ruling is fair and will get my brother treatment. I think that we are safe now. I did everything I could. Now I'm in the airport about to fly home and I'm having a drink to close this horrible chapter. Cheers.